He said, you can't see what's under the ground, but I can. There's something growing, and there's roots growing under the ground right now because seeds were planted. Your job is to focus on the seeds, not the results.
Welcome to the Unbridled Creative, where courage meets calling. If you've ever felt that tug in your heart, that whisper that says there's more, but you're stuck in fear, burnout, or maybe just a version of success that doesn't feel like freedom, then this podcast is for you.
And we're here to inspire, equip, and empower you to build your business with faith, not fear, and to remind you that your calling is worth chasing.
So let's do this. Hey, Trent, I'm so excited to interview you for our podcast today.
Hey, Laura. I don't know if I'm as excited, because, when you're the interviewee, it makes you a little nervous.
You're nervous to be interviewed today?
Not really. I'm just teasing.
Okay. Well, I'm excited for our listeners to get to know you the way that I've had the pleasure of getting to know you. I'll tell everybody that you've been my coach at Be Local for over a year, maybe a year and a half.
Year and a half. Jeez.
Yeah. And I came to you when I was in a darker place in my life and wasn't sure that I wanted to stay on my current path and was feeling kind of uncertain and unfulfilled. And I was comparing myself to other people that were on traditional paths, and I was not on a traditional path. And I was making myself wrong for the fact that I couldn't get excited about the traditional path. And you have been able to help me tap into who I am, what makes me tick, like how I love to serve and impact people, like God's plan for my life. Like we're starting this, this podcast exists because you and I have had conversations almost every day for a year and a half, certainly at least a couple times a week, but almost every day. So I am so excited to introduce you. Let's start by you just telling everybody about yourself and your family and your background and some of that stuff.
Well, one thing you'll learn about me, especially on the Unbridled Creative podcast, is you'll learn about us little by little. But, we figured this was a great idea to, have you learn about us right away. But what's most important to me in my life is my family, God and my family, my creator who created me creative like all of us. And my family. I've got an amazing wife. We've been married close to 33 years, and we have 4 children, adult children and their spouses, and we have 12 grandchildren. And those are the love of my life. And, if I didn't have to work at all, I would just be spending time with all of them all together. But they don't want me to spend time with them all the time. So, but I'm taking this Saturday, I'm taking my son and his son. My son has 7 kids and one of them is a boy. So he's outnumbered big time. Wow. So he just got baptized and accepted the Lord into his heart. And so I'm taking him to Superman, because I want him to know who the real Superman is. Here's this pretend Superman, but you know who the real one is, So that's what's most important to me.
Built an amazing life, and you have a beautiful family. You have how many kids?
4 kids. 4 kids.
4 kids.
And their
how many
spouses
grandkids?
Now. 12. Yeah, it's crazy.
12. So you have a big family.
And just the other day, I was talking to somebody about what does success mean in life, and the world tells us one thing, right? And the term being unbridled, by the way, is to be unbridled from the world's way of doing things, because that's not what honors God. He wants to be honored. He wants to be glorified. So that's my number one priority, is to glorify God in everything I do and say. And when I do make a mistake or trip and fall, I get back up, just like when we're little kids. The baby falls down and you clap and you say, that was awesome. You can get back up now. Let's do it again. When we get to be an adult, you say, what are you doing falling like that? That was stupid. It's silly. I was having this conversation with somebody about what is real success? And I said, I am like wealthy beyond belief. It's not because I have all the money I want or need. It's because God's blessed me with an amazing family. Same with you, Laura. And we've reflected on that too. It's like, that's what's most important. So I wanted to convey that to everybody, because that's what counts. Jobs that you're working at are going to come and go. Businesses sometimes come and go. You're never going to arrive until you end up in heaven. So I always say, once I climb that mountain, it just gives me a better view of the other mountains I'm going to climb and the valleys I'm going to go through, right?
That's right.
The
Well, and
valley victories.
one of the values that we have at Unbridled Creative is living life on your own terms. Like, we decide
Mhm.
what success is.
That's
We
right.
decide how we want to spend our time and how we want to live our
Mhm.
life. So I
Yep.
love that you see yourself as, infinitely wealthy, and the beauty of the family that you've created.
And I don't want people to ever think that when they listen to our podcast and we're interviewing entrepreneurs and other business owners, that the only reason we interview them is because they've made their millions and we want other people to make their millions too. That's not what this podcast is about, because true success isn't in the millions that you make. It's in the people that you serve. And number one, the God we serve. That's the real meaning of life there, from here to heaven.
That's right. And faith is a huge part of this podcast, right? We believe that we have a calling on our life. We believe we have
Mhm.
a calling on our life to step up and produce this podcast.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And it's a lot of hard work. This isn't
it is a
easy.
lot. And we're learning some new skills along the way.
Yep. Yep.
Neither one of us has produced a podcast before, but
Right.
we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell our listeners about your career?
Well, to kind of give you a background, I'm an artist and musician by trade. I'm sitting in my art studio. These are these are some paintings of my grandkids. These are three of my grandkids and reflections of them in their sunglasses, and another one catching rain, and another painting. I do a lot of textural things, but I went to, when I went through high school, I realized that I was going to be a marine biologist. That's what it was, my passion my whole life. I collect seashells, and if I am under a palm tree by a beach with a cool breeze by the ocean, I am in my happy place. So here I am in Columbus, Ohio. I'm like not close to a beach, and any beach in Columbus, Ohio is not really a beach. It's a lot of sandy rocks. And so I even have in my backyard basically a tropical garden, because I have to transplant them every year, but it's my happy place. So it's where I seek peace, because I can't grow a stupid palm tree. So I say that to say, as I was in high school, I had this dream of going to Florida, where my grandparents lived, to go to art school. And unfortunately, the best art school was here in Columbus, in the world. And I was so frustrated. I'm like, I can finally escape. And, as us young people always think, we can finally escape when we turn 18, even though we can't afford to do so. So I was going to be a marine biologist. Well, by the time I was a senior in high school, I was known mostly for my art, my murals on the wall, which remained there for 30 plus years before they tore the school down and rebuilt a new one. And everyone knew me for my art. So I was doing a lot of portraitures and all kinds of things. So I ended up getting a partial scholarship to a college, and it was before computers. And it was an art college here locally. And I was so smart, it took me 7 years to graduate with a bachelor's degree. That's how smart I am. And so I was teasing on a previous podcast that the D I got in algebra, which was when I realized that I wasn't going to, it didn't make sense for me to pursue science and things like that. My D in algebra meant determination to be a great artist.
That's right.
And I'm a
That's right.
musician as well. So I've been a drummer since I was 3 years old. Literally, I had my first set. So that was 56 years ago I've been playing. Doesn't mean you get better every year. Sometimes you get slower the older you get. But I have such a passion for playing drums, and in our worship team, and our kids. We formed a family band as we grew up, and all four of our kids sing amazingly, that family harmony. And now we've got some grandkids starting to sing. So I'm excited about that. But in my career, what happened was I found myself freelancing, always an entrepreneur spirit. I had a paper route when I was 12 years old, and I was always trying to do something that I had ownership over, not control over, but ownership over, something that I could influence, that I was always creating, because I'm an innovator by trade, by mindset, and always wanted to create. So I freelanced a lot. And even in college, I freelanced and made good money working full time and freelancing and going to school, which I paid for my whole schooling. I have an appreciation for students who hunker down and pay for it themselves. And everybody I went to school with, their parents paid for it all. They didn't finish. So I said, that's not going to be me. I'm going to finish. So through that, I ended up getting a few jobs in design, which I'm so glad right now I'm not just a designer because AI is replacing some of that. I'm sad for people that I know that are in the design field, but they have to reinvent themselves too, which is something I had to continue to do because before they didn't have computers in college. So now I own a company that does AI stuff and special software and everything that I do. And people think of my age that I'm too old to do something like that, but I've had to reinvent myself. So it went from what was it? I worked in the advertising industry, billboard industry at one time, signage industry at another time. I wanted to change that market, which I was able to bring electronic displays to the market and did a lot of huge, fancy, awesome projects. And then it converted to color, which was amazing. I know some people are thinking, oh, I don't know any difference, but the blue LED was never invented until like 20 years ago. So you couldn't do color displays that everybody sees everywhere now. And they were really expensive when they invented them. So I went into that market, learned how to build that, created a company called Signimation with some friends of mine. And then that led to the next stage of my life with a branding firm that some friends of mine had taken over ownership of a branding firm that I actually came to know Christ in back in 1990. I came to know the Lord in this studio and called Illustrated Alaskan Moose, stands for I Am. And they were the best of the best in the world at that time. And it was such an honor for me to be brought on in business development because I had been in sales for so long. I was able to get sales because I could cast a vision for somebody. So I would sit down with them, with the salesperson at whatever company I was at as a designer, and they would get the sale every time. And I thought, well, I need to be in that role, so it wasn't because I was a salesperson. It was because I was a visionary and I could help them cast their vision. And that became fun for me because I was serving people. And then that led next to, that was a great 4-year stint of my life working with Mattel and brought on Disney and Hasbro, and everybody knows the Game of Life and Mousetrap and headbands, and the Nerf Rebel, which was a girls line of Nerf blasters, created the whole brand. And it was super fun. We had such a great time. But here's the big story. I told you in the beginning that my family comes first. Well, my wife, we've homeschooled our kids. We homeschooled for 23, 25 years, and 4 teenagers at home. And I was going to have to travel more. And I told the guys, I can't travel more. We can't, it wasn't the direction I knew I had to remain at. So I had to be home. So I came home with my whiteboard and I had a family meeting because they were ganging up on mom, and okay, I had helped my kids create a mission statement for our family. And the reason I say this is I want this to inspire other families, because as a father, it was important for me and my wife to work together to help our kids in the next chapter of their life to be owners of their own lives. And I think my youngest at the time was 12 and my oldest was maybe 19, still living at home, paying rent because he wasn't going to college. Fast forward, none of them went to college, but they're all successful in life now and in great ways. Different fields. One's a full-time mom and another one's self-employed. Another one's a salesperson and another one works at daycare and just having an amazing time. I only say that to say it was that moment, that day, that we reset the mission statement. I had them get out their Bibles and we went to scripture and said, okay, what does God say? They came up with the mission statement and it was awesome. So when they rebelled from that, guess what? I'd point to it because we put it on a frame, which actually fell off and broke. So I left the crack in it. There's another symbology, but I point to that and say, what is your goal? Not mine. What's yours? So, and that helped me also with my own goals and understanding things. So I ramped up a publication with N2 Publishing and a Stroll publication many years, over a decade ago. And that was when it was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, starting a new business, starting over. And so that turned a different direction for our whole entire family and our life to put us to where we are today. And it enabled me time to invent and create and get back to painting and still be involved with music. I've been a drummer for my son's band, and I don't like being the roadie also, I'd rather just step in on the drums. So I do that at church now. Those drums get heavy after a while.
I would love to hear what you love about what we do at N2 and how it serves our community.
Well, the N2, what happened in the beginning and what actually drew me to what N2 was doing was the relationships and the help that area directors were giving to local residents in a couple different capacities. And of course, you and I both started Be Locals about 6 years ago, which was a new brand of N2 because there's several different brands, real producers. You got Stroll and you have Uniquely You and some great brands in Highport. And Be Local was a newer brand reaching out to the new homeowner. Well, we had a Stroll publication, a couple of them, that was neighborhood newsletters that actually serve the neighbors. And what's unique about it, and the reason why it's such a big company with so many directors around the country, over 500, is because the content comes from the local residents. In this day and age right now, having a magazine that's printed, just to be able to print something and mail it to somebody does not mean someone's going to read it. The reason they're going to read it is because of the content that's within. If the content comes from themselves and all the families within their neighborhood, you bet they're going to read it. And if it's something that's helpful to them, like Be Local, being a resource guide to everything in the area, and it goes to a new mover that knows nothing, they don't know what's in the area. They don't know what preferred businesses to use. So when they receive that, that's us being able to be helpful to them. And it's something that businesses can't do themselves, all of the brands. So that's why N2 has been very successful through local area directors in building what they have. Now, it's a business. It can be a struggle sometimes as a director, and it's involving sales and an understanding of marketing. So that was one thing that I understood too, was trying to figure out how to help businesses understand marketing. That became the biggest challenge, especially these days, because there's so much misunderstanding for business owners because they know their craft so well. They don't understand how marketing works. So that became kind of a mission of mine and yours as well. That's why we related so well. We actually, before I was coaching with you, and I say with you instead of coaching you, because it's successful when you're coaching someone who's willing to be coached and to improve themselves. And that's what you are, Laura, as someone who's always trying to improve, always trying to grow. And that's what actually excited me to be able to coach with you and align with you. And then, identified you as a wild horse. Remember that? And you're like,
yes,
that's it. I am.
Yes, I am. I am a wild horse, unbridled.
Yes. And what Laura didn't know is I had been writing a book called Wild Horses, Living a Life Unbridled. And we started talking about being unbridled and being a wild horse and all this stuff. And both of us being in marketing, we have a very deep understanding of marketing in all different areas. So helping business owners understand how to be unbridled from what the world says is normal and to be the creative person that they are and to be okay with that. And to be creative is to do exactly what God created us to do, because he built us creative, every single person in different ways. And it's supposed to be that way. So I do have one story I wanted to tell that pretty much reset things for me. And this was 11 years ago. And I was in the middle of what we call ramp up. Basically at that time, it was showing a black and white magazine that was from California. Here I'm in Columbus, Ohio. And I was showing people, business owners, hey, you could be in this magazine and reach these residents in this neighborhood. And some of them, they were excited about it, saying, well, this makes sense. And others were like, you're crazy. So here's what happened to me. And I tell you this story as an inspirational reflection on what's most important. So I'll make it short, because I am on this road driving to an appointment, and it's called Seeds Road. No lie. I'm not even making this up. So if you know me enough, I always talk about planting seeds, because I believe in being a gardener versus a hunter. Because if you're a hunter for too long, you end up having to move because you've been hunting out the space and there's nothing left to eat.
That's right.
So you have to be a gardener. Now, there may be a moment where you have to be a hunter at first, like I was having to be ramping up this publication to find businesses to partner to be able to support the magazine in the neighborhood. I was so distraught because it was taking me way too long. And it was really difficult because I had left the company, the branding firm, and didn't really want to go. We didn't want to part ways, but I knew it was what I had to do for my family. And so then what happened was I was on this road and I was really having a difficult time that day. I had told a company no that wanted to hire me to run their national division for signs, but I didn't want to go back into that field again. And I told them I was ramping up a neighborhood newsletter. You can imagine their response to me.
They're like, "What? You're doing
Yeah.
what?"
We're going to pay you six figures here, and you're telling me you're ramping up a new neighborhood newsletter and you're making new money right now.
By the way, when you ramp up, you don't make money for a few months. That's just part of the deal.
Yeah. And it was taking me way too long, 6+ months. And I wasn't doing very well. And I felt like a failure. So I'm sitting on this road called Seeds Road, and I stopped the car because you can see for a mile each direction if a car's coming. So I stopped. I put it in park. And I looked around, and all these fields in this area, there's a bunch of cornfields that separate a lot of the areas that I work with. Another challenge I was having because businesses are spread out. So I'm sitting on this road and I see all these cornfields with nothing in it. It's just dry dirt. And I looked around and I'm like, God, this is the way I feel right now. I feel like barren land. Nothing's happening. Nothing's growing. I'm not making any sales. What's wrong with me? And instantly, God reminded me, he said, you can't see what's under the ground, but I can. There's something growing, and there's roots growing under the ground right now because seeds were planted.
Right.
Your job is to focus on the seeds, not the results.
That's right.
And isn't that so true? We get focused on the results.
Absolutely.
You know what happened? You know what happened next?
What?
I was on my way to an appointment. I never met this person. I scheduled it. It was a vet, like a veterinarian. So I walk in the door and I said, I'm here for an appointment with the doctor. The doctor comes up to me from the back and she said, by the way, if this is about marketing, I'm not interested. So that's not what I wanted to hear. But
I've been there. Yep. That's not a good way to start a conversation.
So because I was prayed up at that moment,
and
I was like, I am supposed to plant seeds. I said, well, I guess I'm here for a different reason. And she goes, oh, okay, have a seat. So everybody went to lunch and we sat in the waiting room and we talked and I listened and I listened. And it got to the point where I found out her husband was dying of cancer, of brain cancer.
Heavy.
He didn't know the Lord at all. She did.
Wow.
And she started crying. She had tears going down her face. Here's this lady who told me she wasn't really interested in talking to me about marketing. And here she's crying. She never advertised with me. She never partnered with me. I never saw her again. But here's what happened next. I asked her, can I pray for you and your husband? And she said, please. And I prayed and we cried together. And when I left that place, sorry, I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, no, it's emotional. Yeah.
It reminded me what God's plan is.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't mine. I was supposed to be obedient and surrender to his will. And his will was for me to go there and pray with her, not to make a sale. We get so stuck with thinking we have to push and make things happen in business, especially. And that is being bridled, because what happens when a horse is bridled? There's a horse on top of it, and they're whipping it to go faster around a track, and it's the same track. Circle over and over again. For what purpose? To make the betting audience happy. And who's the betting audience? You can fill in the blank. And so that's where the unbridled creative comes from, and when we were talking about this whole entire scenario, because that was your life as well. You had to jump the fence. And boy, I tell you, how many times we have to jump fences, man. But that was a point in my life where I learned something really big, and I've never forgotten that moment. And I go back to it more often than not, just to be reminded that God's got a greater plan. And I've jumped many fences since then and broke through a few, got thrown over a few, but I had to find my herd, other people that understood. A herd isn't, and you'll hear this, our listeners will hear this quite often too. A herd isn't something that you follow. A herd is something you run with. You run with others who think alike. You hear that term. What was that term we heard somebody say? You follow the herd.
They said don't follow the herd, like it was a bad thing.
Yeah. And actually they have it wrong. That's not what a herd is. A herd is of wild horses that are running, and they're independent, but they're running together to support each other. They want to be supporting each other. They don't need each other. They want to. And they are running. And there's all kinds of interesting things that God created in that analogy. But it's interesting to what's most important, though, is understanding what it means to be part of a herd. So that's what we're trying to build, is a herd of people who understand, and we can share each other's stories, because it's not just about our stories. It's more about other people's stories and how we can apply things in our life and inspire us to know the behind the scenes truths and the transparent stories and all kinds of things that motivate us to do things we never would have believed that we could do. It's because we glorify God in it.
That's right. I mean, this podcast was born from that whole idea that you and I are both unbridled
Yeah.
horses, wild horses, and
Mhm.
sometimes that can be really lonely. So to
Oh,
find someone else that gets you, not
mhm,
only like I get it and I got you. Like I love that little saying, I
mhm.
get it and I got it, right? I get
Yeah.
you and I got you. Like that's what this is about.
So true. So true. But that's me, and my mindset is I've realized is different than some, but the same as many. Don't we often get hung up with comparing ourselves with others and thinking that we're not enough or
Comparison kills. I've heard people say comparison kills. It is a painful thing when
yeah,
you compare yourself to someone else and you feel less than or not worthy of. Yeah.
yeah. And that's envy, at its root in envy. And that's not what I want, but we deal with that. So really what I desire from all of our listeners is to not get stuck with thinking that we have to have full control of our life and everything in it. Because here's the opposite of what the world says. Or I should say, what the world says is you need control over this. You need to have control over something and then find the power within yourself to make it happen. And you can accomplish anything you dream up if you speak it and believe it. Well, that is so untrue at all levels. It doesn't mean that part of that, there's no truth to part of that, because you need to speak positively. You need to focus on the things that are important. You need to be grateful. But to be grateful is different than having faith. Having faith is doing something that you don't know what the results are going to be. Being grateful is reflecting on what has happened. So if you don't know what's going to happen next and you're looking ahead, you're setting goals. There's a book, I wish I could remember the book right now. It's about living a God honoring life. And it's from the president, and you can Google it, the president of KFC, the previous CEO. And he said that there was one day that he was praying, he was really burdened. And he said, God, I will give you my plans and my blueprints, and you just let me know what I need to do next. And God said to him, he said, it was almost like he was speaking to him. It was so clear. He said, I don't want your plans. I want your heart. And I was like, oh man, that was like 3/4 of the way into the book. It was such a great book. And he got to that point finally in the book, which is amazing. And it was amazing points before that. But that one hit me because isn't that true? We often say, hey, God, this is what I'm going to do. Please bless it. And
That's
it's
right.
the opposite of what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to say, okay, God, I'm surrendering to your will. Doesn't mean we don't make plans, right? It's this balance between the two. But I want to honor you in everything that I do. That's the control I want to have, is making sure I'm honoring you and giving you all the credit. And I was reading, actually, we reflected on a recent podcast about this that I mentioned to you. I really wanted to share this today, was miracles don't happen often until there's a barrier or darkness before. Because you think about Abraham in the Bible, the story of Abraham when he goes to sacrifice Isaac, his only son, his only from him and his wife, that was a miracle in itself. And he was told to sacrifice him, which I know it sounds terrible. I had a friend of mine say, that's terrible. That's horrible. How could God allow that? Well, what God was doing was testing Abraham's obedience. And then just in time, he gave him a sacrificial lamb. And guess what that sacrificial lamb represented? 2,000 years later, it represented Jesus, the sacrificial lamb to die for everyone's sins. And that was God's plan. It wasn't my plan. It doesn't make sense. It wasn't Abraham's plan. And the same thing with Moses when he gets to the Red Sea. He finally rescued the Israelites. He gets to the Red Sea and it doesn't part. No one knew it was going to part. God didn't tell Moses either. So I could just imagine everybody, even Moses, he's like, okay, God, what's going on? You told me to go here. I am here. Now we're trapped. The Egyptians are coming. We're going to die. What's going to happen? And then God makes them wait for a little longer. And then everybody's panicked and freaking out. It's exactly what we still do to this day. And then all of a sudden he opens the Red Sea and there's dry ground underneath, which is another miracle. And they get rescued by walking through. Well, God doesn't tell us when the miracles or if the miracles are going to happen. He just wants us to be obedient and to surrender. Surrendering isn't winning, right? If you're in battle, to surrender isn't the cool thing to do, right? But it's what God wants us to do in all aspects of our life. And that's hard. So I wanted to tell those stories because God always humbles me and continues to humble me and all of us. I'm sure we all relate with that. And I am no respecter of persons, and I'm not enough. And, the saying, God will never give you more than you can handle, that's wrong too. He's always going to give you more than you can handle, so you can give him the credit when you get through it. Isn't it funny what the world says and then what the truth is? Really excited about what we've been doing and some of the interviews that we've had. Gosh, inspirational. And I just admire these people that we have on. We even have a jockey coming on that people can listen to as well, which is kind of a cool story in itself. The actual rider of the horse in a race.
Is there anything else, Trent, that you want folks to know about you?
I think I've pretty much said it all because it's pretty simple. I know in my life right now, I am not designing things in my life to have more of and to do more. I don't know about some of you listening. When you get to a certain age, you start reflecting more and looking back on things, looking back at, gee, why did I have that particular thing so important in my life? I know what's most important in my life now. The business that we have built, especially with local lead capture. I really didn't dig into that much, but that's another division of our company that was, I really wanted business owners who are just like me to be able to know who they can connect with in the future and people who are actually looking for what they have to offer. And that's been a challenge for businesses because they spend uncountless amount of money trying to reach the right people, and they don't know who the right people are, and 98% of them are anonymous to them. So I wanted to make at least half of those visible to them. So that's what our system does, and creates systems to enable them to do what they do best, and that's connect with people. And that one-on-one connection in an AI future, it's going to be so true. It's so important to build trust, like we've talked about a lot with building a trust bridge that we have trademarked, building a bridge between people to build that trust. That's so important. So that's what I'm focused on in my life right now. And this podcast is number one importance for me as well, second to my family, because it's so important to get the word out of what the truth is, of what real success is.
Well, I'm so honored to be your co-host. Thank you for taking time today to share your heart and your family and your career and your life and your future with our listeners.
Appreciate you. Thanks, Laura. Thanks everyone.
Trent.
See ya. Thanks for joining us on the Unbridled Creative,
where we believe your story matters, your voice has power, and your dreams were planted on purpose.
And if something sparked in you today, don't let it fade. Take a step, trust the nudge, build the thing.
And if this episode encouraged you, we'd be so grateful if you'd help us spread the message.
And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Share it with a friend who's ready to build with heart, not hype.
And leave us a review. It helps more bold believers find their way here.
Wherever you are in your journey, we hope this show helps spark your hope, fuel your fire, and strengthen your faith in what's possible.
We're cheering you on, praying for you, and showing up every week to help you keep going. So, be bold, break free, and live unbridled.